For questions to the Minister for Infrastructure, Tashi Namaganya Kashni Hogail Dara and Infrastructure, I call Robbie Butler to ask the first question. Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Question number 1, please.
I can see him, Sarah Naira. I call the Minister.
Members will know that I am ambitious for a rail network, and I have a vision to enhance our rail connectivity to better connect our communities while delivering cleaner, greener, more sustainable transport. I was delighted, alongside my counterpart in the Irish Government, Minister Eamon Ryan, to announce the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, which will allow us to consider our network across this island to view how we can improve it for everyone. The review will examine the potential for rail connections across the island, including how our existing connections could be improved and where new rail links could and would be best placed. I want to ensure that any proposals for changes to the rail network include operational and financial viability and have a very clear focus on the part that rail can play in growing our all-island economy while improving the ability of people to connect, access opportunities and address long-standing regional imbalances. The purpose of this review will be to allow data to drive how to improve and expand our rail connections, allowing us to press ahead at long last with enhancing our rail connectivity in Northern Ireland and across the island. The reopening of old railways, including the Lisburn to Antrim Railway, will be considered as part of this overall review. My department is also currently preparing the Regional Strategic Transport Network Transport Plan for public consultation. It is anticipated this plan will be published for consultation later this year, and I would welcome all representations from the public, including those in respect of reopening Lisburn to Antrim Railway Line Van Knockmore through this process.
Mr. Butler for a supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for her encouraging answer. I know that the Minister is also fiscally responsible too in her outlook and should be commended for that. And with regard to providing either new rail network or indeed opening up older ones, obviously there are financial burdens. And does the Minister accept that reopening the Lisburn to Antrim line would be perhaps one of the most cost-effective options that is available to her?
I thank the member for his question. We always have to be very mindful of fiscal constraints and the importance of fiscal responsibility. The member may know that since 2005, TransLink has spent just over £2 million maintaining the line to allow for its current non-passenger use. And while he makes a key point, as stated in the All-Ireland Rail Review, this will allow us to consider our rail network to view how we can improve it for everyone. So while it reflects a commitment under New Decade, New Approach, I want to use this opportunity to examine the data, to examine operational and financial viability and ensure that we can do what we can to enhance our rail network. And specifically within the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review is a focus on how we can connect through rail our international gateways, so our ports and airports would also be an important element of the railway line that the member has highlighted.
Mayor Pat Catney for you cast. I call Pat Catney.
I thank the Minister there for her questions. To my Lagan Valley constituency answer, I know the Minister knows how important rail connectivity will be in helping us reduce emissions. Could the Minister provide an update on her work with Minister Ryan to improve all-island connectivity? Thank you.
I thank the member for his question. And of course, improving our rail network is about connecting communities to opportunities. It enhances our tourism offering, but the member makes a very important point. It is also about ensuring that we're taking action to encourage more people to use sustainable transport, to use public transport, and our rail network is an important part of that. In respect of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, the procurement process has begun. It's restricted to, at the very maximum, a 12-month period. And as I said, it will be data-driven. It will report back. But an important part of that process will be a public consultation exercise. So I would encourage the member and others to make sure that they feed into that process.
Martina Anderson, for you cast. Call Martina Anderson.
Minister, as you know, I've been quite vocal about rail connectivity, particularly in the northwest, maybe sometimes too vocal. But it was welcome that my adjournment debate received cross-party support here a few short months ago. So in light of that, Minister, can you provide an update on the feasibility study to improve the Derry line, and such as the Phase 3 works and the consideration of the half-hourly halts at Ballykelly, Strathfoyle and also the City of Derry Airport?
While it's not necessarily the question that's been asked, it's at the Minister's discretion to answer.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm content to answer. As I've said many times in this chamber and outside it, I believe that rail has huge untapped potential to deliver multiple benefits across our island, and I think it's an important component in terms of addressing regional imbalance as well. That's why I've been very much focused as Minister on improving connectivity to the North West. So it was in line with this commitment that I commissioned a feasibility study to get Phase 3 of the Coleraine to Derry project back on track. As the member has highlighted, I've also commissioned additional studies to explore the possibility of a half-hourly service between Belfast and Derry, as well as providing additional rail halts at Ballykelly, Strathfoyle and the City of Derry Airport, Eglinton as well. I can update members that work on the Phase 3 feasibility study is ongoing, with the number of topographical and pilot studies underway, and the report is still on schedule to be completed by November this year. A full business case will then be prepared and submitted to me, and this will ensure that all future spend is fully informed by a robust business case and that there is high-level assurance on costs and risks and benefit realisation also.
I call Dan Dodds for a question.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The question rightly focuses on the importance of connectivity, and in the original question, rail connectivity. It is hugely important to grow the economy. It's important for our relationships right across this island. And the Minister makes much of her engagement with all island strategies. Could she tell the House what engagement she has and continues to have with the Union Connectivity Review, which is extremely important for connectivity within the United Kingdom?
And again, it's not specifically the question that was asked, so it's at the Minister's discretion what she wants to answer.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. As I have demonstrated on multiple occasions, I very much value the importance of connectivity right across these islands, and I'm also very much committed to partnership working across these islands. I have met Sir Peary Hendy, who is the Chair of the UK Connectivity Review. I've also made a written submission to the review also, and as part of my commitment to working across these islands with my ministerial counterparts, I, as recently as last week, met with my ministerial counterparts in Scotland and in Wales, where we discussed a range of the shared challenges and shared opportunities when it comes to transport and when it comes to modal shift in people's travel, and also on the area of the climate emergency as well. So remain very much committed to working across these islands to improve the lives of everyone in Northern Ireland. I
call Andrew Muir.
Mr Deputy Speaker, reopening old railway lines and abandoned railway lines is a key aspect of our green recovery, which we need to plan for. But can I ask the Minister, in relation to our existing network, what's the current situation with regards to railway passenger numbers, and what's more is being done to encourage people back onto the railway?
I thank the member for his question. I don't have the most up-to-date figures at hand in terms of the passengers who are travelling on our rail transport, but from recollection, some of the most recent figures that I've seen are around kind of the 60% mark. Of course, where we have periods of very good weather and bank holiday weekends, we see an increase in the number of passengers there, and that's why TransLink has put in a series of measures to mitigate against that, working with the PSNI also. But we have, throughout the pandemic, ensured that we have put a number of measures in place to give passengers the confidence to be able to travel. The member will know that we introduced mandatory face coverings in the use of our public transport. We also have a number of additional measures around deep clean and a range of a public awareness campaign also. So we take our safety responsibilities extremely serious as a public transport provider, but we also remain very much committed to ensuring that we can give passengers the confidence to come back onto public transport safely, to do so to get about their everyday lives, but also as an important part of tackling the climate crisis also.
I call Mr Jim Allister.
Wouldn't reopening the Lisburn to Antrim line greatly facilitate a connection to our international airport, and isn't that vital for the future success of that airport?
I thank the member for his question, and as I said in the response to Mr Butler, part of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review is to look at rail connectivity and the links to our international gateways, so our airports like the International Airport, Belfast Airport, Derry, but also to our ports as well. I think that's important in terms of provisions for passengers, but it's also very important, as Ms Dodds highlighted, in terms of growing the economy also, so that will be a key element of that work.
Thank you. And just before we move to the next question, I should remind members that question number 9 has been withdrawn, and topical question 4 from myself has been withdrawn. That could have proven to have had some practical difficulties. Yes. So I call Alan Chambers.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Question 2.
Mr Deputy Speaker, Northern Ireland Water is a statutory consultee in the planning process, and as such the company does not make planning decisions. Local planning is the remit of local councils. Northern Ireland Water provides information and advice to the appropriate local council, and the council is obliged to take that advice into consideration. However, councils ultimately make the planning decision, which may or may not reflect the advice of the statutory consultees. Northern Ireland Water does not receive notifications of the reasons for planning refusals or delays, and therefore would not be in a position to advise on how many planning refusals are related to sewage infrastructure issues. Such information would be best obtained from the planning authorities based within our 11 local councils. However, Northern Ireland Water is due to roll out a new planning response template this month, and the implementation of this template will help facilitate the tracking of negative planning responses provided to the various planning authorities.
Mr Chambers for a supplementary.
I thank the Minister for her answer, but can the Minister detail any cooperation she might be having with the Minister for Communities on this issue, and specifically what solutions have been put forward to allow houses, particularly social housing, to be built in areas that have a weak Northern Ireland water infrastructure?
I thank the member for his question, and he raises a very important point, because we have an acute shortage of social and affordable housing in Northern Ireland, and we need to work collaboratively to address that. Part of the case that I made at the Executive to secure funding was the fact that if we don't invest in our water and our wastewater infrastructure, then we won't be able to build the many homes that we need. I have also, as a Minister for Infrastructure, engaged with the Northern Ireland Federation of Housing Associations, recognising the importance of this issue, and I'm very keen to work with them in terms of any possible pilots for sustainable drainage systems as well. I can also assure the member that Northern Ireland Water has met with the Northern Ireland Federation of Housing Associations and Housing Associations chief executives on several occasions. And we're working with them to address the challenges. I can also advise that we're working, for example, with one of the housing associations, Choice Housing, to look at a pilot programme to try to address some of these issues. So it is an issue that we're very alive to. It's an issue that I have been engaged with all executive colleagues on, and we're working with the housing providers as well as developers also.
Cathal Boylan for question.
Could I welcome the Minister's answers? Minister, you know that the NAW received a budget of 344 million there for the 1 year, but in terms of sewage infrastructure, you mentioned regional imbalance. We need to avoid regional imbalance in terms of infrastructure. So my question would be, there's 100 areas of constraint in terms of sewage infrastructure. Have you any indication of what areas are going to be, or are there those capacity issues over the next year in terms of some of those constraints?
Mr Deputy Speaker, the member is right to highlight the acute difficulties that are presented to themselves when we try to address the historic underfunding of our water and wastewater infrastructure. As a committee member, Mr Boylan will also know that the utility regulator has identified an investment requirement of £2 billion over the next price control period. He has also rightly identified that I have allocated this year some £345.5 million. This is the first time in a long time that the funding requirement identified by the utility regulator has been met. We know that we have around 100 locations in Northern Ireland that are either at or beyond their developmental capacity. As a result of this year's funding, we should be able to address some 40 of those locations. I'm happy to provide the member with a detailed list of the projects that we intend to take forward, because I've also ensured that by allocating from my department this year, we can accelerate some of the projects that were due to be worked on. So I'm happy to provide that detail to the member.
Colin McGrath for question.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Minister's answers so far, which includes reference to that substantial investment that there is in Northern Ireland Water and which it has been looking for a long time. It will undoubtedly go a great way to resolve a lot of the problems in the construction industry as well. But could the Minister detail maybe how long it will take for Northern Ireland Water to be able to assess the capacity concerns so that people can start to get some sort of timescale to assist them with their work going forward?
Mr Deputy Speaker, I can advise that given the level of investment that is required, it is envisaged that it could take some 12 years, so 2 price control periods, to address the issues that have been identified in our water and wastewater infrastructure. So it is very clear that we need to have a plan going forward, and that as an executive we need to continue to prioritise investment in our water and wastewater infrastructure if we are to realise any of the outcomes in our draft programme for government.
Jonathan Buckley for a question.
Speaker and Minister, while I welcome your response and know the pressures that are now on Northern Ireland Water and the need for continued investment to allow development to continue, the Minister will know of my continual plea for those uncompleted developments who still to this day cannot connect up in terms of their road infrastructure and indeed water infrastructure because of problems with legacy developers who are now no longer to be on the scene. Minister, I think of Birchwood Manor in my own constituency, which I've repeatedly lobbied for. Has the Minister engaged with NI Water about ways in which they can help connect these forgotten developments so that those citizens can benefit from the full infrastructure that they deserve in their developments?
I thank the member for his question, and he has identified an issue. And, as we have referenced in terms of the questions to date, in respect of Northern Ireland Water and our water and wastewater infrastructure, we are struggling to secure the requisite funding that is needed for Northern Ireland Water to fulfil its statutory obligations. There are a number of sites across Northern Ireland that remain unadopted, and their water and wastewater infrastructure is not within the ownership or the responsibility of Northern Ireland Water. In saying that, Northern Ireland Water has been engaging with residents across a number of those sites and remains willing and able and ready to engage with developers and with residents to try to find some forms of resolution to this very difficult issue.
Leah Flynn, when you cashed, I call her Leah Flynn for a question.
Question number 3, please.
Last year, I established my Blue-Green Infrastructure Fund to focus efforts on a green recovery. Out of that fund, I invested £6 million specifically in active travel schemes, including both spend by my department and grant funding for greenways delivered by councils. This is the highest level of funding for active travel projects in a single year. For this year, 2021-22, I have more than doubled that commitment to £13.5 million for active travel. I'm very conscious of the need to develop better walking, wheeling and cycling infrastructure right across the city, and particularly in areas such as North and West Belfast, where there is currently a notable lack of facilities. To demonstrate my commitment to enhancing cycling connectivity in Belfast, I announced on the 4th of June the publication of Making Belfast an Active City, Belfast Cycling Network 2021. The publication of the network provides a blueprint for the development and delivery of coherent, connected and safe infrastructure for everyday cycling in the city over the next 10 years. As part of a £3 million investment in walking and cycling in the Belfast area, some £750,000 is earmarked for Belfast Cycling Network schemes in 2021-22 as a starting point. Work will also be undertaken in developing schemes for delivery in subsequent years. I want to move from plans to actual delivery on the ground, and I have asked officials to focus on what can be delivered in all parts of the city in the short term and to work with stakeholders to make better walking, wheeling and cycling infrastructure a reality in both West Belfast and throughout the city. I also recently met with the West Belfast Partnership Board to discuss their vision and ambitions for development of safe, attractive, comprehensive commuter cycle routes in West Belfast. I very much welcome their positive response to the Belfast Cycling Network and the proposals for West Belfast. My walking and cycling champion is continuing to work with stakeholders from the partnership to increase active travel in the west of the city.
Leah Flynn, supplementary question for Leah Flynn.
And I thank the Minister for her detailed response there, and she's probably partially answered the supplementary. The additional money for the active travel, which is a big improvement on previous years. is welcome, although it's a small percentage of that that goes towards cycling. And with the Belfast Cycle Network Plan, although again very welcome, it's getting the funding to deliver to the areas that need it. And West Belfast obviously only has 1% of the city's cycling infrastructure. So maybe outside of the meetings with officials and the West Belfast Partnership Board, is there any other initiatives that the Minister can take to sort of ensure that the active travel is firmly rooted within her budget and to get that spread across all the areas evenly? Thank you.
As the member points out, I think it's really important that we enhance our walking and cycling infrastructure, particularly in the areas across Northern Ireland where there is a dearth. I think the reality is that we're starting from a very low starting point, and when you're working on these schemes, considerable amount of time and effort has to go through to the design of the schemes, doing the community consultation. The other restriction that we have is that we're still operating from single-year budgets. So while I have identified a £100 million investment for the Belfast Bicycle Plan over the next 10 years, of course I can only commit a single-year funding to that. So I've gave a commitment, as I've said, I've put in the greatest amount of investment in our active travel from any other minister. I remain committed to doing that. And as I've said, I've also increased staffing resource within each of the divisions across Northern Ireland so that we have very much at the heart of each of our roads divisions a very clear focus on active travel, the design and the expansion of our networks.
Pat Catney. Pat Catney for
and thank you, Minister, for your answers so far. Minister, what plans are there for expansion of the greenways and cycling across Belfast and Lagan Valley? Thank you.
In order to deliver my ambition of £13.5 million specifically to active travel, as I've said, I've resourced additional staff within all 4 roads divisions. These staff, along with existing staff, are currently working on bringing forward schemes for delivery this year and next. Officials are also working, as I said, on a delivery plan for the Belfast Cycling Network, and I plan to publish that in the autumn. The delivery plan will identify key schemes throughout the city, with a particular focus on those areas where there is currently little separated or traffic-free infrastructure. It will also provide a focus on linking pieces of isolated infrastructure into a more coherent network of routes. A key element of securing delivery is communication with stakeholders and consultation on proposed designs. This is resource intensive and inevitably means that this will form a greater proportion of the work in the earlier years of delivery. Consequently, capital expenditure will be low in year 1, but it will build year on year over 10 years to deliver the £100 million that I have identified as required for implementation.
Paula Bradshaw for a question.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Minister, for answering the written questions I submitted around South Belfast. We have a lot of very keen cyclists there, and also the information on the Belfast Cycling Network. You mentioned there around stakeholder engagement. I would appreciate if you could give us a wee bit more details on that, and also how you're going to cope with the arterial routes, especially in South Belfast, where there are cars that are parked in the middle of cycle lanes at present. Thank you.
As I said, an important part of this work is to bring communities with us, and so we carry out a degree of community consultation. If I think, for example, in the member's constituency of South Belfast, there is a pop-up cycle lane on the Dublin Road, for example. The member will also know that there's currently 2 petitions. One to have it removed, one to keep it. So it just shows and is an example of the difficulties that you can face and the challenges when we try to bring about change. In saying that, in respect of that particular cycle lane, we're engaging in a survey at present. We're hoping that that will be completed by September. So that's to get the views of people to hopefully to build on that. In terms of South Belfast, there will be challenges, and that's why we're trying to take a very kind of pragmatic and flexible approach. I think the best approach is to advance those schemes where they're easily implemented, because I'm a believer that when you demonstrate success you can build momentum. So we will be very much led by that, but of course we'll continue to work with elected representatives and councils as well, so that we can make as much progress as possible. Related to this is the issue of pavement parking as well, and that's an issue that I've also been very keen to try to explore, so I'm working with officials as well. We need to take a more comprehensive and holistic approach to these matters rather than just look at cycle lanes on their own. It's about how people can move about much more freely and how we can maximise the opportunities that they have to engage in active travel and safe active travel as much as possible.
Can we bring Claire Sugden onto the screens, please?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Question number 4.
A primary function of the Department with respect to planning is to formulate and coordinate policy for securing the orderly and consistent development of land and the planning of that development. The transfer of powers to councils and the introduction of the two-tier planning system was intended to enable councils to interpret and apply strategic policy as set out in the Strategic Planning Policy Statement for their areas through their local development plan and development management responsibilities. This has empowered local government to meet the needs and aspirations of local communities, taking account of the particular context and circumstances which they face. There will therefore be some different local planning policies and decisions to reflect the differing circumstances of each of our councils. However, it is also important for the integrity of the planning system that the wider regional policy objectives set by my department are maintained across Northern Ireland. The Department has a number of powers and functions which enable it to monitor the operation of planning matters by councils, to oversee and secure the implementation of both regional policy and good practices. The Department's interest in exercising these powers is not to interfere with a council's right and responsibility to take its own decisions, but for the purpose of considering the exercise of its strategic functions and to safeguard against systemic risks to the achievement of regional planning objectives.
I'll invite Claire Sugden for a supplementary, but can she hear us okay? It's just we can't see you, Claire. No, we'll try and come back to you if we establish connectivity here. But Currimi Keshnish, Irime, Sinead Dennis, for when you Keshtachar, call Sinead Dennis to ask a question.
Can I ask the Minister, in terms of planning, there's probably no decision more anticipated than that of Casement Park. We know the huge cultural and economic benefits that executive flagship project will bring. So can I ask the Minister, when will she be in a position to finally approve plan and permission for Casement Park?
Thank the member for her question. And Casement is a hugely important application. As with all applications, my officials are working to progress it properly and at pace. My planning officials went out to Belfast City Council for a consultation as required under the legislation. My understanding is that we have just received the formal response from Belfast City Council, so my officials will be reviewing that and continuing to work very hard to ensure that we can get this application processed, obviously correctly following all of the statutory procedures and requirements. And as I've stated many times in this House, rugby has its home, soccer has its home. It is only right that Gaelic Games would have their home and in Ulster.
I call Roy Beggs for a question.
Deputy Speaker, how homes and businesses are developed across each of the councils and indeed in their area plans can have huge long-term implications in terms of their energy requirements for transport and for heating. So my question to the Minister is, how can we ensure that there is a consistent approach, and in particular to ensure that climate change implications are taken on board?
The member raises a very important point, and as I said in the response to Ms Sugden, we need to have a degree of flexibility for councils to be able to tailor their local development plans to meet the needs of their local population, but we also need consistency and adherence to wider strategic policy. My view and the strategic plan and policy is around sustainable development, so that has to be a key component of that. The member will know that I've also recently announced that I'm taking forward a review for renewable and low-carbon energy development within the wider context of the climate emergency, and that's part of our efforts to support a green recovery from this pandemic. It is also one of the reasons why I'm very keen to pursue the Independent Infrastructure Commission as well, because I think this would have an important role to play in ensuring that we bring experts in, that we have that important element of public consultation, and that we have a 30-year vision for our infrastructure and planning that has very much at its heart the need to be ambitious when it comes to tackling the climate crisis.
I call Jonathan Buckley.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and the committee will watch closely and follow closely the review of the planning policy as something as a key priority area for the committee. And while I recognise that area plans will allow councils to rightly tailor plans to local needs, which was the primary purpose of the devolving of those powers, can the Minister indicate whether or not her department will be looking into whether or not planning powers that were devolved to Council have both been operating efficiently and effectively for the constituents in which we all serve, because there are many within the planning system right now that are frustrated by the long delay in planning applications, not in any particular area, but across the board. Is that something that the Minister will look at going forward in a review?
So there are two elements to this. There is the need to be monitoring our local councils in terms of their plan and performance review, and there are a number of ways that my department is doing that. The second element is, what is my department doing to improve its performance when it comes to the planning system? And so my department is working closely with key stakeholders in a number of ways to improve the processes and increase the efficiency of the planning system to ensure that planning applications are processed in a timely manner. The member will know that we have conducted and carried out a review of the implementation of the Planning Act 2011. That review is underway, and it will provide an opportunity to consider any improvements which may be required to the way in which the Planning Act has been commenced and implemented in subordinate legislation. Work is also ongoing with statutory consultees through a cross-government planning forum to improve processes around statutory consultation and statutory consultation response times. And in addition to that, my department, as part of a collaborative project with 10 councils, will be delivering a new planning IT system next year, which will improve the submission and processing of planning applications. Community engagement is also a really important part of our planning process, and an area that I believe should be improved, and that's why I established the Planning Engagement Partnership, and that's to look at how to enhance the quality and depth of community engagement in the planning process at both the regional and local planning levels. I recognise the need to have improvements in our planning system at both the regional and a local level, and so remain committed to doing what we can in the department, but also working with our local councils as well, given the importance of it to grow in our economy, and that's particularly acute as we emerge from this pandemic.
That ends the period for listed questions. We will now move on to 15 minutes of topical questions, and I call Stephen Dunn.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the Minister will be well aware of the very significant backlog in getting practical driving tests. Many are simply unable to get a test. Can I ask what further affirmative action that the Minister is going to take to address this unacceptable backlog? Thank you.
First of all, Mr Deputy Speaker, if I could just pass my condolences to Mr Dunn on the death of his father, and just to say that he's very much welcome in this chamber. The DVA currently has 38 full-time driving examiners and 39 dual-role examiners who conduct both vehicle and driving tests and can be utilised across the network of test centres to meet driver testing demand. A further 10 new dual-role examiners have been identified for driving examiner training, and the first of these examiners is now conducting Category B, which is private car driving tests, and a further tranche, if they successfully complete their training, will commence driver testing by mid-July. In addition, the DVA is also currently progressing an external recruitment competition for 10 new full-time driving examiners who we expect to start testing by mid-September. The DVA has identified 4 additional departmental buildings in Belfast, Coleraine, Cookstown and Omagh, which can be used as temporary driving tests if they are needed in the local area and there is sufficient driving examiner capacity. The new temporary test centres at Cookstown and Omagh have now opened for appointments, and this has been communicated to all approved instructors and customers through the normal channels, including NI Direct and social media. DVA is also offering driving tests on Sundays for heavy goods vehicles and buses at Belfast, Craigavon and Derry, where it is suitable to do so without compromising the integrity of the test. The DVA is also offering Category B and modular for CPC tests in some locations on Sundays, again where it is suitable to do so without compromising the integrity of the test. The lighter nights also provides the opportunity to increase the number of driving tests that DVA can conduct each day, and each Category B driving examiner is conducting between 6 and 9 driving tests per day. Extended opening hours will require the use of overtime to provide the additional capacity, which is being offered to all trained driving examiners on a voluntary basis in line with Northern Ireland Civil Service terms and conditions.
Mr Dunn for a supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answer and her welcome here today. And I certainly welcome those actions to take, because it is very, very frustrating, particularly for young people who are trying to get on the test. Just in late April, there were over 22,000 people who held valid theory tests, and they were waiting to get a practical driving test. Can you just maybe tell the House what the latest figures on it are, if possible? Thank you.
Given the public interest in the statistics that the member has requested, the Department is now publishing provisional testing statistics on a monthly reporting cycle, and they're all available on the Department's website. The latest monthly report for May 2021 was published on the 15th of June. The monthly report for June 2021 is scheduled to be released on the 20th of July. I can assure the member that the Driver and Vehicle Agency has and continues to work hard to increase its capacity to meet the high demand for driving tests for all customers. Through increasing its capacity, I'm pleased to say that in May, the DVA conducted 5,476 driving tests, which is 35% higher than the 5-year average for that month. I remain committed to minimising disruption and ensuring our plans for the restoration of services in hand. However, all driving test services across these islands are experiencing high demand with longer than usual waiting times, and we would ask customers for their continued patience while we work as hard as we can to work our way through the backlog.
I call Mr Alan Chambers.
Deputy Speaker, whilst there has been a welcome increased capital funding for Northern Ireland Water this year, they need a long-term plan with significantly greater funding in subsequent years to develop the water and sewage infrastructure to allow new homes and businesses to be built and, importantly, to mitigate against localised flooding. What is the Minister doing to secure this long-term plan and funding?
I thank the member for his question, and as we discussed in the questions so far, there has been historic underinvestment in our water and wastewater infrastructure, and I don't need to rehearse the social, economic or environmental reasons why we need to correct that failure. The utility regulator has identified £2 billion as the funding requirement for the next price control period, so that's for the next 6 years. As I've said in response to a previous question, it is estimated that it will take us 12 years to correct all of the challenges in our water and wastewater infrastructure. We are severely hampered by the fact that we're still operating from single-year budgets, and while I'm pleased that this year I've been able to allocate enough funding to meet the utility regulator's requirement, there is a significant challenge every subsequent year. So as long as I'm the Minister for Infrastructure, I will continue to make the case around the executive table, because if we don't invest in our water and wastewater infrastructure, we simply won't create the jobs that we need, we won't grow the economy in the way that we want to, we won't be able to build the many homes that we need, and we certainly won't be able to tackle the climate emergency.
Mr Chambers for a supplementary question.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for her answer, and I do recognise and acknowledge her difficulties, and I think she maybe has answered my supplementary in her answer there. But what are the consequences if Northern Ireland Water is not properly funded in subsequent years in terms of our water and sewage infrastructure?
Since taking up this post, one of the things that I realised is that we take for granted our access to safe, clean drinking water. We take for granted access to a clean and efficient wastewater system. And in actual fact, if we had any severe difficulties in that area, our society would grind to a halt. It's a public health issue, it's an economic issue, it's a societal issue, and it's also an environmental issue. It was perhaps one of the most important areas requiring sustained investment that we have going right across our economy. And I make the point again that we may have our difficulties in the executive, but we all believe in ensuring that through our programme for government we really can get the right outcomes for our citizens. The Minister for Economy, the Minister for Education, the Minister for Communities, myself, none of us will be able to achieve those outcomes if we don't invest in our water and our wastewater infrastructure.
I call Mervyn Storey.
Thank you very much, Deputy Principal Speaker. Minister, one of the issues that you have sought to champion has been the issue of integrated transport. And when you come to a regional town such as Ballymoney, where I live, sadly that is not the case, because if you step off the train and you seek to get a bus at the train station, you have to walk to the centre of the town or on the outskirts of the 30 mile an hour. What undertaking will you give serious consideration to an integrated facility in Ballymoney as a regional town, the one of only which I think has such a facility, doesn't have such a facility, so that bus and rail are integrated in a way that gives the passenger experience the best possible opportunity?
I thank the member for his question, I think we'd be doing a lot more, if I'm being honest, in terms of having a more integrated system when it comes to transport, and actually seeing how all of the components of a transport system come together. So how we maximise active travel opportunities, what we do to encourage people into public transport, the role of taxis, and we had a debate earlier on in the Chamber on the importance of our taxi industry, and our private busing operators, as well as community transport, how all of those come together. The member may know that my officials are working on the Regional Strategic Transport Network Plan, and that's going to look at our transport system, our bus, road and rail up to 2030. That's going to go out for consultation later this year, and I would encourage the member to respond to that. On the particular issues of Ballymoney, I'm happy to, if the member wants to write to me around specific asks, to look to see, is there something that we could do in advance of the Regional Strategic Transport Plan, or certainly at least to hear him out and, have the case made to me.
Mr Story for a supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Speaker. And I thank the Minister for giving us that opportunity to, and we will respond. But will she also take in mind that it's not just the impact that it has on local commuters in terms of Ballymoney, but the town of Ballycastle, which is very dependent on its connection to Ballymoney for the train service, which has been a phenomenal success. But will she also ensure that a regional town like Ballycastle has that interconnectivity, so that whether you are a visitor or whether you're a resident, there's an integrated approach to transport between. It's not a case of either or, it is a combination of both between rail and bus.
Yeah, I thank the member for his question, and I know that I speak very passionately, some people might say, about rail connectivity. I actually do so because it's been neglected, and I think it's a huge untapped resource, in terms of our island and Northern Ireland in particular. I don't say that because I want to see that happening at the detriment of our bus network. I actually believe in growing our public transport network. So for me, it's very much looking at both and seeing what we can do to maximise that. And the member will also know that what I've done is significant investment in our bus provision around hydrogen buses, for example, again. So very much committed to greening the public transport network, greening our bus network, and will continue to remain committed to doing so.
The member isn't in his place for the next question, so therefore I call for Declan McAleer on screens, please.
Can I ask the Minister for an update on the public inquiry into proposals for the gold mine in the Sperrins AONB?
Yeah, the member will be aware that I announced my clear commitment to a public inquiry. The PAC has indicated that it wishes to have all of the relevant information before it in terms of giving us a date for the hearing. So the member will be aware that in respect of the power lines, there is remaining information to be gathered on that. When all of that is submitted, and at the earliest opportunity, we will be submitting all of that information to the PAC, and then obviously the member will know that it is up to the PAC to set a date for that public inquiry. I believe this is important because it will give everyone, particularly the local community, the opportunity to have their say and for their views to be listened to. There is remaining information to be gathered on that. When all of that is submitted, and at the earliest opportunity, we will be submitting all of that information to the PAC, and then obviously the member will know that it is up to the PAC indicated that it wishes to have all of the relevant information. I believe this is important.
Declan and Walter and Shinnerfad, are you still with us? Declan? No.
I'm having technical difficulties, but the Minister will be aware that there is a very contentious local issue. There's almost 40,000 people have registered objections. Can she give a timeline for this inquiry and assurance that it will be accessible and will carefully take on board the views of the local community?
I I recognise that this is a hugely complex and controversial application, which was why I was very clear on my commitment to go into a public inquiry. The member will know that that's an independent process, and so therefore the date for that hearing is out with the gift of myself as the Minister for Infrastructure, but I can assure him that we are doing everything that we can to ensure that all of the information is available as quickly as possible to ensure that that is then provided to the public inquiry, because I recognise the importance of giving people the opportunity to have their voices and their views heard on this really important and difficult application.
Member isn't here for question number 7, so I think we'll get question in from yourself there, Mr. Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I ask the Minister in relation to roads maintenance, and there's been gross underspend in recent years in the roads maintenance budget. Even recently, contractors were pulled off roads. They were told in the morning the money had run done in the Southern Division a few weeks ago. Has the Minister any plans to increase the maintenance budget?
Roads maintenance is a hugely important issue, and I've said in this House that you need to get the basics right for people to have confidence in you as an executive and as a minister, but we also need to be doing the transformative pieces of work as well. I bid for £120 million for road maintenance in this financial year. That's an increase on last year, and the member may also know that in terms of the Rural Roads Fund, I have increased that fund by 50%, so that we now have £15 million set aside specifically for rural roads. The member may also know that the asphalt contracts were subject to legal challenge. My officials are currently working through interim solutions to try to address that, because I want to make sure that we're getting work on the ground as quickly as possible. But I do want to reassure him that none of that will impact upon the Rural Roads Fund.
Brief supplementary, Mr. Irwin.
Can I thank the Minister for her response? But the Minister was fully and acutely aware, I'm sure, of the dire state of some roads, and I think it is vital that as much as possible can be put into those roads.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to thank the member because he continually raises this issue and gives it the rightful recognition that it deserves. He will know that the Barton report identified a funding requirement or an investment requirement of about £140 million per annum just to maintain the road network as is. So it is hugely challenging in terms of the financial situation, but I will continue to do what I can to ensure that we can get our roads fixed. And I'm also very mindful of the state of the roads in our rural communities as well, which is why I'm advancing the Rural Roads Fund.
Members, that ends topical questions. If you choose to take your ease there till we move to the next item of business, or the continuation of the Integrated Education Bill.